Hi guys, so the next thing that I wanted to talk about was the difference between positive and negative for acceleration and velocity and what that means in terms of speeding up and slowing down. I think that it's kind of a common misconception to think that a positive acceleration would mean that you're speeding up and a negative acceleration would mean that you're slowing down. But that's only true if your velocity is in the positive direction. So if you're driving in a car, if you're going forward and you have a positive acceleration, then that means your car is speeding up. If you're going backwards, if you are going in reverse and your acceleration was positive, that's actually going to slow you down because it increases your velocity. So I'll try and show you what I mean here. So if acceleration is positive, what that means is that velocity is increasing. So if we had, and you can kind of imagine a table like in the last video, but if I had a number line for velocity, so if we're talking about a positive acceleration means velocity is increasing, that means that the velocity is moving to the right on a number line. The numbers are getting bigger. Now, if the velocity was at a positive 1, for instance, and increasing that velocity, so the velocity is like the dot here, that it's at a 1, and the acceleration is moving it in a positive direction, then those numbers are going to get bigger. That velocity is going to change from a 1 to a 2 to a 3. If, however, your velocity itself was in the negatives, like at a -2, then the acceleration is still increasing the number of the velocity, increasing the value of the velocity. It's going in the positive direction. So here, if your velocity starts negative and you increase it, it's actually going to a smaller number. So it's the absolute value or the magnitude of the velocity that kind of feels like how fast the thing is moving, kind of irregardless of the direction of movement. So what this is kind of a description of what the positive velocity means in terms of when, or the positive acceleration, pardon me, in terms of when velocity is in a positive position or in a negative position. You can also kind of think of that as a table. So if we listed out values of velocity at different times, so this would have a positive acceleration because the velocity is increasing. That +1, +1, +1 pattern. So that's a positive velocity. That has a positive value of velocity. If we had a similar kind of table where we had time and different velocities, maybe we have a velocity of 3, then 1, then -1, then -3, then -5. This has a negative velocity acceleration, negative acceleration because the velocity is decreasing each time. And obviously looking at it in terms of a table, that's discrete value. So we would be looking at average acceleration over that time frame between, say, 1 and 2 seconds or 2 and 3 seconds. But it works in really the same way conceptually for the instantaneous, where we have a function come from a derivative for the acceleration. Okay. So I'm going to kind of get down to the speeding up or slowing down. The difference between velocity, whether the sign is positive or negative, that tells you the direction of the movement. So if the velocity is positive, movement is in the positive direction. If the velocity is negative, movement is in the negative direction. And that can also be up or down, but more typically it's shown as right and left, like it would be on a number line. Okay, we're going to combine this together and look at what that means in terms of speeding up and slowing down. So, if your velocity is positive, you're moving in. So if, say, v is greater than 0, your velocity, you've got movement in this direction, and your acceleration means that you're increasing values of velocity. So kind of if v is greater than 0 and a is greater than 0. So if they're both positive, that's like back here. You've got a velocity in a positive side and the acceleration is increasing those values. So maybe your velocity was positive 10 and you've got an acceleration of 2, then your new velocity would be 12. So it's increasing. So acceleration is working with velocity to increase the value there. That will be speeding up, moving to the right. We see speeding up or slowing down to refer to the magnitude of the velocity. It's getting to be a bigger number. If we have a positive acceleration but a negative velocity, that means your velocity is moving to the left, but you're increasing those values of the velocity number. So maybe your velocity was -5. If you increase -5, make it a bigger number, that's getting closer to 0. -4 is bigger than -5. So you're increasing the value, bringing it closer to 0 because it was negative. So that would be like back here where you've got a negative value for velocity, and if you increase that, it actually comes out to a smaller number. So this would be slowing down and you're moving to the left. If we have acceleration is negative and velocity is positive, so here we've got our positive velocity, but acceleration is going in a negative direction. It's reducing the values of your velocity number. The rate of change of velocity is negative. That means it's decreasing. That would be an example like this second table back here where I had positive velocities at the start, but it was decreasing. That's going to slow you down. While your velocity is in the positive direction, you're moving to the right, but it's slowing you down because acceleration is working in the opposite direction. And the last, I guess, kind of situation here would be a negative acceleration and a negative velocity. So in that case, the velocity tells us that we're moving to the left, and the acceleration is decreasing those values. If you have a negative value, like maybe your velocity is -10, and you decrease -10, you get a bigger negative number. You get -11, -12, -13. Those are objectively absolute value, talking magnitude-wise, that's bigger numbers. That means faster movement. It's movement to the left, but it's still faster. So that is speeding you up. So that's kind of the 4 different cases. And if you look at which ones have speeding up, it's when the signs of the velocity and acceleration match, when they're both positive or both negatives. And which ones have slowing down, that's when the signs are different. When your velocity and acceleration are going in different directions, you're going to get a smaller magnitude of the subsequent velocities.